Good afternoon to you all, and you're welcome to Civic Space TV. You're also very much welcome to the Women's Show. This is episode 4. Can you imagine? It's been 4 episodes already. Just yesterday we were doing episode 1, and now here we are on our 4th episode and continuing to grow. Today we continue with conversations that put women at the center. Today we continue with conversations that put women at the center of governance issues. And we have 2 amazing panelists. In our first and second show, I hope that you remember that we discussed the women's movement and its growth. In our third show, which happened last week, we were talking about the budget and its implications on women, but also looking at it through a gendered lens. Today, we continue to talk about women in governance. And so we will be interrogating women in the cabinet. As you're all aware, about 2 weeks ago, we had a new cabinet released. Actually, it's I think 3 weeks ago. We had a new cabinet released, and we scored quite a number of, juicy positions in the parliament. So today's 1-hour discussion is really going to be around women in the cabinet and if our time as women has finally come. And joining me on this amazing conversation, because I know it's going to be beautiful, are 2 impeccable women. And right to my immediate right, us in Africa, you first start by saying, So yes, to my immediate right is Eunice Musiime, who is the Executive Director of Akina Mama Africa. Eunice has an impeccable CV, working in the governance space in the accountability sector, but also doing a lot of work around feminist leadership and generally gender empowerment for women. So Eunice, you're very much welcome to Civic Space TV.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, viewers, and thank you so much, Isabella.
Thank you very much, Eunice. And to my far right is one of the new entrants in Parliament, Kassanda woman MP, Flavia Kalule. She has, there's a 4th name which I have forgotten, but we have Honorable Flavia Kalule with us today, woman MP Kassanda District, who will also be joining us as we weigh into the conversation on women in Parliament. So Flavia, you're very much welcome.
Thank you very much, Bella, and good afternoon, viewers. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So, because Civic Space TV and the Women's Show in particular are looking at diversities of women, so our audience is quite diverse, we will start from a conversation that we in the space, I know Flavia is formerly civil society, so we in the civil society space, but also we in the governance space think is a basic conversation. Why is it important that women are part of political office? Why is it important that we even have a conversation around women in cabinet? And I'll go with Eunice first.
Yes, thank you, Isabella. Uganda and many African countries have got 51% of the population as women and girls. So it's important that the leadership is representative of the population. So it speaks volumes to have a population that is 51% women, but then that percentage is not represented in leadership or in decision-making spaces. When you look at the African continent, we have 54 African states, and about 1% of the presidents are women. I would say actually 99% of African leadership is male-dominated. So what that means is that the voices, the needs, the interests of a certain population are not represented in decision-making. And so that's at that basic level, would want to see that our needs, our felt needs, our interests are also part and parcel of informing and shaping the development and trajectory of our nation states. So at that level, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Eunice. Flavia, would you like to weigh in on the issue?
Thank you very much, Bella. First of all, I think it's quite important that we have women joining these political spaces for obvious reasons. If we do not have the women there who will better represent their needs and concerns, yes, there is this whole argument of men who can ably, represent women's issues, but if I am going through a period and you're a man talking about a menstrual period that I'm going through, you will never understand it because you've never had one. But I have been there. I know what it feels. I know how it feels. I know how it behaves. So I will better explain it and better make a demand for what exactly I need. So it's important as well that we have women in politics because, one, they can represent themselves better, effectively. They can also speak to their needs and know their particular concerns. Also, we know that politics has been largely male-dominated. For example, look at our 11th parliament. We have 529 members of parliament, but we have only about 171 that are women in there. The rest are all male. And that means the previous parliament, we had only about 19 that were women that came on direct seats, which means that if we didn't even have affirmative action with us, that is largely stipulated in the Constitution, Article 32 and 33, that would mean that we don't even have enough women in that parliament out of a total of over 300 and 400 and something that were in last parliament. We'd only have 19. So we need the women for better representation, but we also need them to be able to articulate issues of women, not necessarily just being in parliament or in politics to benefit or to get like is the common saying, but to actually articulate those issues. And so I think it's largely important that we have women in the political spaces because they can add value to a number of factors. They can also add value to a number of decisions that have been made. And I have seen this firsthand. When there is no woman in a room at any decision-making table, believe me, women will get left out. I have seen this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Flavia. And maybe at this point in time, I'd like to congratulate every woman who made it to Uganda's cabinet list, especially our new Vice President, Honorable Jessica Alupo, and our Prime Minister, our new Prime Minister. And there's been a lot of conversation, especially around those two positions, which we will get to at a certain point. But looking at the women's agenda, looking at the women's manifesto, looking at the priorities of women, what are some of the wins that we can begin to celebrate with the cabinet that we have currently? Eunice.
Yes, thank you, Isabella, for congratulating our women. I also add my voice to say that our sisters that have made it to this new government, we congratulate you, we recognize you, we see you, and we celebrate you. We celebrate that win. We know that for you to be in those positions, it's against all odds. The systems that we operate in were not designed for women to be in those positions. So for any woman to make it into a position of power, we know that she has had to fight against all odds to make it there. So we recognize that and we celebrate you that you're there and that you act as inspiration, as role models for those young women. I've met several young women who have said that the fact that the Speaker of Parliament was a woman inspired them to rise up to a position of leadership. So not only are you inspiring girls, I know, for example, my son was a head boy, and when I asked him, why did you stand to become a head boy? And he said, oh yeah, mommy, because you are always training women to get into positions of leadership. So I was like, I need to start with myself. So I do recognize that having women in those positions of leadership is an inspiration to so many. They will act as role models to so many. Many will say, wow, if those women can make it to vice president, to prime minister, why not myself? And therefore, they will aim for more. So we celebrate that gain, that they are playing that role. And then, of course, also, they are changing the face of leadership. Each time we have a pictorial of, say, African presidents or East African community presidents who are there, it's simply men. Yes. But now that we have a female president from Tanzania, and maybe also now that we have a vice president, we're going to see that there's a change. We're changing the face of leadership in the sense that in that very minute way, those are the small shifts that we can celebrate, that you're not going to have a pictorial of East African community where it's still all men. For the first time, we're going to have a female right there. And so even for Uganda, when we have a vice president who is female, we also hope that she'll be representative in certain spaces, and therefore it also changes the face of leadership.
Okay, so you talk about pictorial, it's going to change the picture. And so to Flavia, beyond the picture, because at times when we have conversations around representation, some of the things that come up are you're being participated. Professor Ndebesa always says, are you participating or you're being participated? So how do we ensure that it's beyond the picture? You're in parliament, and so you will be working closely with cabinet. How do we ensure, as women legislators, as the women's movement, that it's not just another picture opportunity, but we are able to reap as the women of Uganda?
Thank you so much, Bella, and I want to thank Eunice for raising those pertinent issues, especially about women in leadership. In there, definitely, it shapes the picture of our country that we have women in those key top positions. Because before, in Uganda and Africa at large, most women that were put in cabinet were given, not that all positions are biased or anything, but there are certain positions that were meant like for women. For example, when you go even in our villages, in our local settings, most chairpersons are always the men, and then the vice chairperson is always a woman, and then the secretary is always a woman. The treasurer is most of the times the man. Even posts like Minister of Finance, those Minister of Defense, Minister of Trade, like some of those largely known as hardcore male positions, they're always given to the men because they feel women are softer and cannot deal with that kind of responsibility head on. So most of the times we are given positions like Minister of Education because they feel it's more of a social service. Women can ably do that. Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Health, those kind of soft positions. But I'm glad that we have broken the ceiling and we now can aspire for more and have been given the hardcore positions. Like, of course, Vice President is still, but at least we are now on Prime Minister, which is really good because we've never had a female Prime Minister, First Deputy. We recently had a Speaker who left the position and all that, but at least we are getting there. Now, it is one thing to rejoice about these achievements and these milestones that we have taken, that we have achieved so far as a country. And I really want to commend those women, all those women that we are given those positions. We congratulate you and we hope that you will use those positions responsibly. The challenge you have, and these women have in cabinet right now, is the fact that we know much as the constitution stipulates that these women have the positions and they have been given those positions and they have their say and can do their work really well. They have influence. They have certain powers above them. And I'll not even a bit around the bush. They have the president who they have to account to and who they have to answer to. And the president, we all know that in the current context that we are in Uganda, the one president that we have is the singular person who is the alpha and omega of everything. He has ministers, but he never completely allows them to do their work independently. They always have to keep consulting with him. They can never make individual decisions. They can never act according to their mandate individually. So if they think they are working on a policy or a law, for example, is not up to his needs and is not matching to what his political will is, it will definitely, end there. Take an example. We've had women in these positions and in a number of powerful positions. But why do we have certain gender laws and policies that have failed to pass? So it doesn't automatically mean that when you have those women in those key positions, you're going to have an improved livelihood in the women's lives, the ordinary woman's life. Because first of all, they are looking at these positions. I saw all the cabinet ministers. I saw how the Honorable Prime Minister celebrated and the other ministers. Because for them, they feel like this is a gift. putting them in these positions is a gift to them. They are the mercy of that one human being, the alpha and omega of this country, the one dictator that we have, General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. So there is no way they are going to be thinking about women's issues, sexual offences bill. How do we get it passed? Because according to the general, that is not his priority at the moment. His priority is how do we increase the security budget. His priority is how do we buy more tear gas. His priority is how do we suffocate and stifle more voices, civic space, civic, engagement. So now they are going to be held down by that you're put in this very powerful position, but who really has the power to act? Is it you, or is it still the same man that you are always talking about and the same men that you are always talking about that have the power, that can decide for you? So you have this big office, but you cannot even use it to help the ordinary woman out there. So I think for me that is where our biggest problem is, because we look at these affirmative action spaces, but also we look at anything that has been given to women as tokenism. We are always so grateful that, they have finally remembered us. Who am I to be put in such a powerful position? I'm looking at the Prime Minister, and I'm really rooting for her to use that office very powerfully and be able to change certain things. She cannot change everything because we know it. But can she change certain things? But we also know that she's not going to work alone. And she's working in an extremely complicated environment. And so all the women ministers, they're working. As long as, Bella, I do not believe that if you're working under dictatorship, there's anything useful you're going to add. I'm sorry to say this. I don't think it's even possible that you can change anything. I keep challenging my colleagues who join NRM, the women. And I tell them, how do you join a rotten system hoping that you're going to be the one to overhaul the system, the rotten system? Because 35 years is too much of a long time for systems to break down and to get spoiled. So how do you think you're going to be able to change or overhaul this system unless when we get a new presidency, unless when we get a totally new leadership, new systems? That's the only way we as women leaders can make impact within such a rotten system. But as long as it is still that system, we shall speak very well with them here. And as the women's movement, we've always embraced them. We shall work comfortably. But now when it gets to the real difficult asks, you will put Honorable Alupo. You will approach her. You will approach Honorable Prime Minister. You will approach Honorable Sebugwao, and you will ask them for something, and they will tell you, Imbero Jiraba. You understand. I cannot raise my voice over such an issue. We had a few women who could break ground and break the silence, like Honorable Matembe, Honorable Winnie Byanyima, the Trade Minister, Amelia Chambade. But you see where they all end up. Eventually, they are all thrown out for questioning, for asking the hard questions. So I think it's terribly disappointing, but also almost impossible to work in such a dictatorship and think that as a woman, because if men have failed to make the impact, then the women that you have in there, about 10, 12 of them, which impact will they bring? Putting in consideration the already difficult gender roles that hold them down, not to fully achieve as men can. Thank you.
Thank you
Could
very
I
much.
add something to what
Absolutely,
Flavia?
yes.
So for women leaders to thrive, the system must be created for them to thrive. Yeah. So right now we do not have a system that is going to enable the women leaders to thrive. And therefore we should also lower our expectations on what they can actually deliver. So yes, we can celebrate that we've managed to get women into those positions of leadership, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to work around the system that can enable the women leaders to actually deliver on what they have set out to do. I wanted to add also that we cannot discuss the recent appointment of women into cabinet without discussing the connection to democracy, good governance, rule of law, without the overall framework of a system that is enabling for leaders to thrive. And we know that right now in Uganda, we've had massive reversals in our democracy, in our good governance, in our rule of law. So what that means is that women are accessing positions of power, and when they reach in those spaces, the rules of the game have shifted elsewhere. It means that then women leaders have to find a way, they have to navigate in the new informal spaces where decisions are being made. So you have a prime minister who is supposed to be powerful in position, but then you have other decision makers. So you, for example, have the president's brother, General Salim Salih, more powerful. He's been said to be the de facto vice president. So you have Your Excellency, the vice president in name, but then you also have the de facto vice president, who is not shadow, not shadow. He's the actual. So then it means that this woman has to navigate in different ways. So while we can celebrate that we as women leaders, we are making it to these spaces of power, but the rules of the game have changed. And therefore we need to learn where the decisions are being made are actually women having influence in those spaces where the actual decisions for this country are being made. And if that's not the case, then it means that there's a lot of work that we need to do. So as the women's movement, much as we focus on advancing our feminist issues, we also need to deeply connect with advancing democracy, rule of law, governance, because that's the only way that women will thrive in leadership in a system where there's no democracy. So for example, our neighbors, Rwanda, they have 64% of women in parliament. Phenomenal. We've celebrated it for so many years. But if you're going to dig deep and ask yourself, who is making the decisions? The story is telling, and that too, now we are celebrating over 40% in cabinet of women, but is that actually going to translate into women having influence in those spaces of power? So we often say as women, it's not enough to have women in power without power. So the women are in power but without power. So is that what we are looking for? No, what we are looking for is that we have women who are able to shift power relations in those spaces, that we have women who are sharing power and not that power is being made. And like Honorable Flavia has spoken about, what we see is a lot of patrimonialism, where decisions are being made by Museveni the man, Museveni the machinery, Museveni the system. So then it does not matter whether you're the prime minister or you're the vice president, because the decisions are being made by a certain small cohort of people. And so that's something that we need to interrogate further as we discuss the fact that we have more women now seemingly in positions of power.
Okay, so thank you very much, Eunice and Flavia. And so now I'm wondering, Eunice, you and I, who sent out the congratulations at the beginning of the show, which you have said was still a good thing that we did. But we have 5 years to go. We just opened up a new parliament, a new term, a new office for the current MPs. You talk about systems and the fact that we need to check these systems. From the conversation that we just had, it seems like all hope is lost. Okay? It seems like we are in this ditch, which does not look like we are about to get out of. And so when we have conversations around gender and we have conversations around numbers and representation, and then begin to interrogate results, and the results are not as we expect them to be, how do we get out of this abyss? How do we get out of this abyss? And tangibly, because I know that Flavia talked about, actually the two of you talked about this system of a man, you know? And that could be one of the things that we interrogate. But before we get into the long term, what are some of the immediate actions we could take to ensure that we have we have results to talk about, and we're not coming back after 5 years to say this is exactly what we said was going to happen, and we have the same exact results. So what direction are we looking towards, so that this conversation has a ray of hope? Yes.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I would like to say that time is an equalizer.
Yes.
And that, first of all, to also say that numbers matter. Numbers matter because when you have the numbers, you can begin to tilt. In our civil society space, we speak about the spectrum of allies. In that spectrum of allies is that you begin to identify small waves of change. So you begin to identify, wow, we can now celebrate the fact that Honorable Flavia, who previously was part of the women's movement, is now in that space of power. And therefore, having Honorable Flavia there and more others there, it's really ultimately supposed to lead to certain changes. Who knew, for example, that in this parliament we would have the leader of opposition from the National Unity Party? So who knew that that would happen? What did it take? So it means that time is an equalizer. It means that numbers matter. It means that we have to continue creating awareness. It means that we should not shy away from these conversations. I know a number of people have said to me, oh, Eunice, you're from Akina Mama or Africa, you are about women's leadership, you need to celebrate these numbers. And yes, I celebrate these numbers, but then I also don't shy away from critically looking and saying, are these numbers actually going to translate into better outcomes? So that means that we have to wear higher boots and get deeper into the mud and the puddle and say we have to do a lot more work in this current environment to ensure that that we are working more towards the good governance of this country, towards democracy of this country, which are then the indicators that are going to enable the system to become better. So if women are getting into patriarchal systems, it means that then we have to work better to deconstruct that system, to dismantle that system. If women are failing to work because of a capitalist system, because resources is an important equation. So then it means that we need to have the numbers of people that are working as well to provide alternatives to this capitalist system. So it means that we're going to be equipping our women with this critical analysis lens as well, that such that they are not going to say, yes, I have gotten here by being a mobilizer and organizer for NRM, but once I'm here, let me take a step back and reflect and say, is this really a winning game? Is that the way I want to live the rest of my leadership as an honorable Prime Minister? So we need to be able to also have those spaces where we engage with our women leaders and call them to account and call them to leadership. I have seen, for example, Honorable Nabanja respond directly to people who are questioning her competence. So it means that they do listen. The fact that President Museveni, immediately after appointing the new leadership, said, oh, you know, all of you intellectuals are questioning why I appointed these people, but these are like fishermen who Jesus appointed. So he's listening. So it means that we need to keep raising our voices and calling out for better and not tire. And when we do tire, we take a step back and allow others on the front line to continue calling. Okay. So it's not all lost for the next 5 years.
It's not all lost.
It's not all lost.
It sounds so depressing.
It means that we have to wear higher boots,
yes,
and get deeper into the mud. Yes.
Flavia, as you come to give a rejoinder to Eunice's submission, do you think that, because Eunice talks about allyship. So allyship has a lot to do with working together, you know, building spaces where we can work together. But to be able to work together like that, one has to have a teachable spirit, and one has to be willing. As someone who moves in the corridors of power, is the spirit teachable?
That's a hard question.
Because you might go there saying come, 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 but is there a willingness? Do you think?
Thank you so much, Bella. Is the spirit teachable? That's very interesting. And for me to start with the conversation that I had with Eunice here one day, because Eunice is among my mentors, and there's a time we are talking and I was questioning the whole aspect of why should women, even women that have worked in accountability spaces like civil society, why should they make very deliberate decisions to join the NRM when they are joining politics? Yeah. You know? Why? Why can't they say, because I have seen ABCD, let me make a very conscious decision not to increase their numbers, not to be part of the mass that they are talking about that simply says, yes, let's go with what the man has said. Why? I kept interrogating that question, and for me it puzzles me, because this is where the consciousness for you to decide whether you can be taught or not starts from the onset on which party you decide to join when you want to run as a member of parliament, as a local government councillor, or even when you want to work as a political analyst or a supporter in any way. Which political party do you choose to join right from the beginning? And as long as we have women who know very well what the system is and how hard it is to break this system and make a contribution, joining the very oppressive system that we are fighting, that they have been fighting for years, and they make this conscious decision to join that exact system, then I think the spirit is not willing to be teachable, first of all. So there is lost cause, there is lost faith. However, I also want to say that we still have hope, and we are going to topple the system. Of course, the National Unity Platform, the People Power Movement, for us, we are on a roller coaster. This is not the last time you've heard of us or you've seen of us. This is not the last time you're seeing our president, Honorable Robert Chagulanyi. He's definitely going to come up. We are going to use these 5 years. And I'm telling you, Ugandans, we may not even have to wait for the 5 years to elapse for us to get the change we desire. Because smaller bits of things that these guys are doing, they themselves are breaking down the system themselves. So that means that they're even helping Ugandans remove them from power much faster. So we know and we believe that within these 5 years, Ugandans, through our messaging, through the constant civic awareness that we are raising, that civil society organizations are raising, that our music is raising, that we are building so many citizens who are civically conscious of what they need to do, and they are going to do it. Then secondly, for these people that are already in cabinet, and for even fellow MPs that have joined parliament, yes, it may seem like a far-fetched cry that we are going to achieve ABCD, that you're going to achieve ABCD. Definitely the expectations are high, but set for yourself smaller milestones to achieve. For example, Honorable Prime Minister, how would you help Ugandans? Look through some of the gender-related laws and policies that have failed to pass for years. Get your team together that you can now ably command because you're their leader of government business. Get them together as women, first of all. Create allyship with them and say, these are the laws. Of these 3 laws that have failed, that have rotted in parliament, which one can we give to Ugandans to celebrate? Look through it, analyze it. And then say, let us at least give them 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 if the powers that be don't allow us to pass all of them. Let us fight for that one that they can be able to get. Let us try to look at smaller things like now the COVID situation that we are in. Women are always dying in the hospitals. We are seeing so many people that have been dying in the hospitals, but you're the accounting officer. You have the powers to question who are the people who stole the funds that were supposed to be used for oxygen. Are you willing enough to sacrifice yourself for that? to be counted, to be seen as one who is standing on the right side, even amidst this very destructive system? Are you going to be that one human being that will not be swallowed up by the amoeba that you're working in? Or you're also going to say, let me just eat my food. Kange kamere kange. Ebyo tebinkwatako. Are you going to be the one who will say simala gogera, even when you're in that very powerful position? So I think for us, achieving those smaller milestones can help you break through some of the systems, so that we can celebrate you as an individual, because we are now holding them accountable individually, not as a collective. We are looking at you as an individual. Now, about them willing, we talk to these women, we see these people in parliament, and it's funny that you talk about, are they teachable? For the few months I have been in parliament and some of the things that have passed, because it was basically about approving ministers, the vice and the prime minister, and then the speaker. From this little exercise that I have seen that you have conducted as a parliament, I will tell you, Ghanaians, honestly speaking, it's going to be a whole 5 long years of getting citizen needs looked at and addressed in that parliament. One, parliament is about numbers. And as long as you Ugandans continue sending NRM guys in that parliament, and the NRM guys who, I just don't know what, I don't understand them. You look at them like they are sober, but the moment they get into their spaces, their caucuses, even the most sober of them that you knew, that you spoke with and agreed that this is really true, will come out saying something different. So as long as, for me, I believe NRM is all corrupt and we can't have any hope with them. There can't even be one nice tomato out of the rotten ones. For me, that is what I see with them. Because you come out talking and they come out saying something different. It's the money, it's the corruption, it's the intimidation. I don't know what those guys have on NRM guys, but there's something about the NRM system that just doesn't allow them to be themselves. So, one, we need to reduce on their numbers. Ugandans, please, kindly implore you, send more of us in there than more of them. Because as long as you have them, it will never change the situation. What we promise you as opposition guys, the people who are rightfully supposed to be in government and we are rigged out through the different torture chambers that you are aware of, is we are going to debate. We are going to raise concerns. We are going to speak. We shall not be silent. We know when it comes to voting, we may never have the votes. But we are definitely going to expose the systems. We are definitely going to air the concerns of people. And we shall stand with them on that. We will try to work with our comrades in the NRM. We will definitely try. Because you can achieve some things together. But I know majority of them may not be willing to stick their necks out for us. But we shall try, and we shall never stop try talking to them to get them to our side. So to get them to understand reason, to get them to see what is really right in front of them. But most importantly, we shall never struggle, we shall never stop fighting with them to be courageous enough to do what is right. It takes courage, because in a system that they are working in, it really takes a lot of courage for you to be counted alone.
So, the conversation we have seems to suggest that the women that we have in cabinet are pieces on a chessboard. We are in the last segment of the show, and maybe one of the other more important questions to have is, as women, do we recognize the points in time when we are actually pawns? And this is within cabinet, within parliament, within the civil society space that we are in. Do we recognize that the patriarchy is active in all these spaces? And do we recognize that half the time we are pieces being moved?
They are being participated.
Yeah, because also it's to say that if you are in cabinet, then do you recognize how much of no power you have? And how do you deal with that? And this is a complicated one, I must admit.
Yes.
It's a complicated one.
So I think when we have different rules of the game at
Yes.
play, it's then time for us as well to do more work, to ask ourselves, how then do you navigate in this kind of space? So I think we've done a lot of training women for the formal system.
Yes.
And so then you have Honorable Flavia making it to Parliament, and she knows that this is the formal system of how I'm going to operate. So we've done that. So what we will need to do as well as civil society is to begin then saying, how then do you operate in this kind of environment where it's mostly the informal rules at play? How do you navigate the intricate corridors of power? Yes. So I know that, for example, the former Vice President, Professor Bukenya, wrote a book along those lines, navigating the intricate corridors of power. And it was really to forecast what was coming ahead. At that time, we had a hybrid democracy, so there were spaces for where consultations were made and the right thing was done. But right now, we've then transcended into a full-blown dictatorship. So it means then that we have to work with our women to also navigate, how do you lead in a dictatorship? Yeah, because equally, as well as civil society, we also have to find ways of saying, how do we work in a space such as this? Equally, for Honorable Flavia, it's the same question that she's raising. How do I become a legislator where we know that what is decided elsewhere is what pertains in Parliament? So we saw the nomination of the speakership. The decisions were not being made in Parliament. The president himself admitted to finishing a meeting and making calls the whole night such that his decision will fly. So all those are red flags to the rest of us as Ugandans to ask ourselves. But as Honorable Flavia spoke, what came to mind for me was that the hope is in the citizenry. The hope is in the citizenry to hold that one member of parliament who is my member of parliament to account. If I do that, and Isabella, you do that for your member of parliament and others, then we are growing a movement that is holding those members of parliament accountable. And it does not matter whether they are NRM or opposition. And that's why we see the attrition rate for members of parliament was so high this time round, because the citizenry were saying, no, you're not going back. You've done what you've done there, but you're not going back. So if members of parliament are also aware that there's an active citizenry that is watching and questioning their actions, then maybe they will act differently. So our hope is actually in us as Ugandans.
Okay. So we have all listened, and the next 5 years are going to be almost business as usual, or even worse, unless we make certain changes towards how we behave with our leadership. And so as we come to the close of the show, I know that Flavia and Eunice have both made a call to the citizens on some of the things you can do to ensure that we have results from our cabinet, but also results from our parliament. But as we conclude, your parting shots, especially around hope, parting shots especially about how we can, anyway, parting shots on hope, because because the conversation has been quite depressing. So for the people that are listening, where are our hope lines in summary? Because I know that they've kept coming through the entire show, but as we conclude. Yes.
Thank you so much. First of all, Bella, yes, we live in very depressing times. Yes. That's true. The situation these days, especially this past week with the COVID and you seeing how people are exploiting the COVID. Some people's deaths are because of negligence or because of some corrupt officials that were able, whisked all the money that was supposed to be used, instead of channeling it to the right service delivery, they channel it into their own pockets and no accountability is given, and these people are not even held accountable. Definitely, We just came out of a very messy election, general election, that left so many heartbroken and hopeless. Hopeless in the sense that they don't have any hope anymore. And now we have a dictatorship that we are working under, but a dictatorship that I'm also very much encouraged by the tagline of we are removing a dictator, because he is not here to stay. We have to remove him either way. He will have to go one way or the other. I think it's very difficult to see hope, but there should always be hope. Because even in the darkest of times, even in the darkest of tunnels, there is always a ray of light at the end. And so I also believe that in our current conundrum, we have some hope. I am one of the people that is silently rooting for all the women ministers to make a difference, to stand out. Because it's difficult with women. If one woman fails, it is all of us, the women, that have failed. But if one woman succeeds, you give hope and inspiration to so many others to be able to break through and succeed. Also, if this person that is using you as a pawn on the chessboard has put you there to embarrass you and to really show the women who keep demanding, oh, we need women in these spaces, we have able women, to prove to you that even when you're put in those positions of power, there is nothing, there is no difference you can make. Even for only disproving him that we can do it, I'm praying that they can be able to do that for him. Take your smaller, bite what you can chew. Bite what you can chew. Take small bits. It's an elephant, but you can get smaller parts of your achievements, of your milestones, that you can say, let me do this, let me be able to achieve this. Even when everything fails, let me be counted for this one or two things that I was able to do and deliver on. But to us in the political spaces, of course I am happy that this parliament has a number of young women. And me being the person that doesn't sit down, I am definitely going to see how to position myself with these young women. We definitely need to, because we need to find ways of engaging as the younger women, because parliament is now divided. It has the older women and the younger women. It has the older guys that have been there for 5, 6, 7 terms. Then it has those that are just starting, because we have very many new ones. So how do we tap into these new legislators that have come in? How do we make our mark and leave our mark in this country without getting so corrupted by the older guys that have been there and that feel we know everywhere, we know these walls, we know the power centers, we know how to break through and how to manipulate. So definitely, I know that this is a challenge to me, and it's something we discussed with you, Bella, that I'm willing to take on, to see how to bring together the younger women legislators, female legislators, so that we can be able to have our voice and be listened to and be heard. But also train ourselves in a number of things, because I was just telling you, I have been in these corridors of power, but I got into parliament and I felt like this is one huge school that I'm getting lost into if I don't attach myself to someone. With all the networks that I have in parliament and the people that I know, then what happens to that woman, young woman who has just joined for the first time, has no legislator they know, don't even know how to speak, how to manipulate the spaces. So that means that we have to find ways of finding solace and solidarity with each other, with the sisterhood within parliament. And of course, working very closely with the civil society, the women's movement out to help us. I also see, finally, my ray of hope comes in the fact that we are removing a dictator. And he's definitely going. And I am very proud of the National Unity Platform, the People Power Movement, and what we are able to bring on board this time round. There's so many now legislators that we have in parliament, but also not just the legislators in parliament and local government councils, but even the citizenry, awakening them to be so conscious of the things around us and being able to question and to say, this is right, this is wrong. Being able to see those things and questioning. Right now I have a case in Kassanda that we are solving. One of the women died as a result of negligence at our health center 4. But it's the very citizens, the very ordinary people that were calling us and telling us this is happening, this needs to be, we need to be able to do this. They are the very people who are at hospital holding the doctor accountable, even with us the leaders, without us the leaders telling them what to do. They're already doing it. So the fact that we created that that level of awareness for people to know that you will not shut us down, we shall talk, we shall keep the money, is also a bonus. And I know within a few years the national unity platform is going to be the government, and the dictator will be no more. That's why you find even those MPs, as they are talking to us, they are telling us, but when you're in your government, you people should never forget us. Because we are removing a dictator. Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you for having me.
Eunice, your parting shots.
My parting shots. A few years ago, when I worked for the National NGO Forum, we had a mantra which was play your part. So in these next 5 years, for me, it's to play my part and also to call on others to play their part. If we all played our parts, then our smaller parts will come together and become fuller parts that will be able to create that change that we want to see. And I am positive, unlike Bella, and yes, I am positive that the change that we want to see is only a matter of time. Yeah.
So thank you very much. And before we conclude, I'd just like to remind each and every one of you that is watching that we are in a very dangerous wave and time of the COVID pandemic. So don't forget to mask up. Don't forget to social distance. Try and avoid crowds as much as you can. Don't visit the old. Get vaccinated. And that's our message from Civic TV, from the Women's Space to you. On behalf of the TV and on behalf of the Center for Constitutional Governance, I'd like to thank our panelists today, Eunice Musiime, the Executive Director of Akina Mama Africa, and Honorable Flavia Kalule, the woman MP of Kassanda District. My name is Isabella Akiteng, and it's been a pleasure spending the last 1 hour with you. Have a great, great day. Thank you.